Hey, what's up, you guys? I'm Shamiriel, and we're back with another episode of And Just Like That. If you watched my first episode recap, you'll see that I'm doing this one a little bit differently. I am going to basically watch the episode again and get my reaction as I'm watching it, as opposed to taking notes and reading off my notes. So, in full disclosure, I've seen all the episodes. I'm fully caught up. I want to say it's up to episode 4 now. So, I'm watching it again, but giving you my thoughts on my second viewing. So we're gonna go ahead and get this going. I'll be pausing throughout and just giving you a little recap. So let me know if you like this format better than me taking notes and reading off my notes. And we're just trying new things here, and we'll see how it goes, okay? Okay. Okay. I don't need to see Brady having sex. That's number one. Number two, why is he so bold to not only be having sex in his parents' house, but to be having sex in his parents' house while they are home, and having sex in his parents' house while they are home and knocking the headboard against the wall? What kind of mess is this, and why are they allowing this? Who I'm not, I was gonna say who does that. Anyway, so Brady's having sex with his girlfriend in his parents' house while his parents are home, and he's banging the headboard up against the wall. Okay. All right. Carrie just called Miranda because Big died, and so she obviously needs a friend. And there's the body bag just right in the background. Okay. So that's happening. Carrie just called Miranda over to comfort her because obviously, you know, when your husband dies, you need somebody. And Miranda is now spending the night at Carrie's house, which I'm sure she probably enjoys since she can't hear two teenagers banging in the next room. Oh, poor Carrie. It's gotta suck. Oh, she's trying to sleep and she's having flashbacks of when she first saw Big. Do you ever wonder if stuff like that happened in your life, who would you call? Am I associating too much with the show? Okay, so the air conditioning just came on. Hopefully that won't be too loud. And yes, I just said the air conditioning in December. But the weather, it's currently what? 70 degrees outside. Carrie's trying to find a funeral home to take care of her dead husband. Miranda's still over. She basically has to leave Carrie alone to go to school. Carrie is going to reach out to Charlotte and get Charlotte to come with her to funeral homes because, you know, Charlotte ain't got no job. And that was shady. Carrie's going to call Charlotte for her to come with her to funeral homes while Miranda goes to school. All right, Stanford and Anthony were beefing last episode. They've since heard about Big's death, and so now they're basically made up and they're not going to fight over things that are stupid and petty. You know, they're doing that thing that some people tend to do when someone close to them dies. So, you know, they're all lovey-dovey and all that. Okay, Charlotte and Carrie are at a funeral home. Again, trying to find either a casket or a place in which to hold Big. Carrie talks about how Big wouldn't like the place because it's a lot of beige. And you know, beige is bullshit. If you're an old school Sex and the City fan, you get that reference. So Carrie seems to be kind of numb to the whole thing. You know, different people respond differently to grief. Or what's this girl's name? Charlotte is beside herself because she thinks that had Carrie gone to the Hamptons with Big, then he would have rode the Peloton, he would have had a heart attack, and then he'd still be here. But Charlotte feels guilty because she pressured Carrie into coming to watch Lily play, and therefore she wasn't there for her husband when he was having a heart attack. So Charlotte feels terrible. She's having a full-blown meltdown in the funeral home. Carrie is now comforting her, despite Carrie being the person who lost her husband. She's now comforting Charlotte, who's having a full-blown meltdown. The lady who works at the funeral home comes in and she's like, "Oh, Mrs. Preston, I'm so sorry for your loss." And she's like, "Oh yeah, the one that's not crying, she's the one whose husband's dead. That one, not the one who's having a full-blown meltdown." So Charlotte is definitely doing the most. So Carrie basically can't deal with Charlotte right now, so she puts her on in a cab, and an Uber, and a Lyft, one of those, in a car service, and she sends her right on home. All right, where's Carrie going now? Where's she going? Oh, well, she's walking. Miranda's at school. She runs into her professor, and mind you, she's definitely had some very awkward encounters with her professor in the past, trying to prove how woke she is and all of that stuff, and it's been very uncomfortable, very cringe-worthy. And so now her law professor is having trouble getting into the school because she doesn't have her ID. Miranda feels as though this is a white savior moment for her, and she's like, "Do you know who she is?" And she's a professor, and da-da-da-da. And the professor, Naya, she's like, "It's really not that deep. Like, I literally just don't have my ID." And she's like, "You know, you're not you didn't question me about my identity, but you're a questioner." She feels like this is a moment where she can be an ally and step up and do all those things when that's not what this is. But I guess we should appreciate her efforts, she says with conviction. So yeah, Miranda just can't seem to get it together with her professor, but whatever. Okay. What's happening now? Charlotte is with her kids. Again, they're doing that thing that you do when someone dies and you're like, "Oh, I love everybody." Okay, Charlotte is talking to LTK, and I feel so bad. I don't know what the LTK is. Lisa, right? I should know this. Out of everybody's name, I should know Lisa's name. Lisa and Naya. But she's talking to her and just, I think they had plans and she canceled. I'm fast forwarding, don't judge me. Okay, Miranda and Steve are getting ready for the funeral. They have a moment. Brady comes in, you know, they're all group hug, etc. Okay, Carrie, it's time for the funeral now. Carrie is giving us funeral chic. Stanford says that she is like their Jackie Kennedy with the fashions. And Anthony was like, "Maybe don't tell her that." He's like, "Yeah, I kind of already did." They're at the funeral place now, and Carrie's upset because she told them no flowers, and she sees that there's this big elaborate flower display on the coffin. And she basically is like, "What the fuck? Like, I said no flowers." And they were like, "We wanted you to at least see them so that you could see them and make an informed decision, but, you know, whatever." And so she hands her the card for the sender of the flowers, and the flowers are from Samantha. And that was just a very, you know, sweet thing, and them just, you know, still trying to make Samantha's presence felt even though she's not physically there. Once Carrie sees that the flowers are from Samantha, she allows them to stay. Remember, I may or may not have mentioned this earlier, but they kind of allude to Miranda drinking a lot when she's drinking. I remember she's drunk at Charlotte's daughter's recital. She had a bottle of wine in her thing. Now she's at the funeral asking for a bourbon because she says that she has to speak and she's nervous and, you know, she needs some liquid courage, so to speak. And yeah, so basically she's asking for a shot before the funeral, which to me just kind of further elaborates on the storyline of Miranda possibly having a drinking problem. Or a problem with alcohol. Whichever one sounds nicest. Stanford feels some way about Miranda speaking at the funeral, not him. Miranda gives a speech that Carrie wrote. They do a slideshow, like a slideshow, is that the right word? A photo, yeah, a slideshow of all the pictures of Big when he was little up until, you know, whatever. His brother speaks and talks about how happy Carrie made him. What is this lady's name? Samantha. Carrie runs into Susan Sharon. I remember her because she was the girl who had the husband who was mean and he would yell at her all the time, and she was like, oh, you should leave him. And then she resented Carrie for telling her she should leave her husband. She ends up going back to the husband, and they end up getting a dog that Charlotte had tried to have and couldn't. It didn't work out for her, so she gave them the dog. I remember the dog's name is Henry. I've watched entirely too much Sex in the City. But Susan Sharon runs into Carrie, and she's just like, I forgive you. And basically Carrie is like, I didn't even know we had beef, but cool, thanks. And Bitsy is there again too, and apparently Bobby died. I think that was his name, her husband. Alright, so now we run into Che, which is Carrie's coworker or boss. She also does the podcast. I think she's like the primary host of the podcast. Che is out smoking weed. Brady comes up. He's trying to smoke weed. He does smoke weed. Miranda comes out and catches him. She throws a huge bitch fit and fusses at him and calls Che a funeral pot pusher. And yeah, it's just a whole thing. So that happens. Miranda and Che are not off to the best start. And then at this point they haven't officially met. They haven't officially been introduced. Miranda doesn't know who this person is other than someone who's trying to push pot on her 17-year-old son. And then after they have their exchanging of words, Carrie's like, oh, Miranda, have you met Che? And it's like, oh, open mouth, insert foot again for Miranda. Like, that's her whole theme apparently, is sticking her foot in her mouth and drinking. That's her motivation this season. Okay, so what does Shay do? Shay, her podcast boss. Shay is Carrie's podcast boss. So then they meet and pretend like they didn't just have words 90 seconds ago. Okay, now what's happening? Carrie is back at her home, and there is a boatload of funeral parting gifts or funeral gifts. I don't know the proper phrase, but basically things that people give people when they lost someone, and they say no flowers please, so they send you things like balloons and whatever else she has lined up in the hallway. Carrie really does look fabulous though. I mean, are we surprised? It looks like Charlotte spent the night at Carrie's house. Carrie is sending a text to Samantha to thank her for the flowers. There's this whole exchange with Miranda and her professor, who she keeps running into. I'm like, I know New York City's not, I don't know. It just seems like they run into each other entirely too much for it to be a coincidence, but maybe it's not. Anyway, they run into each other. Naya's being harassed by some guy who looks like he's trying to do some social media video. Miranda hits him over the head with the book. They have a moment, whatever. So now it's like kind of setting the stage for Miranda and her professor and Naya to be friends, or at least friendly. Carrie's got a package. It is Big's remains. Her husband's remains were just delivered to her in a box. So now we know that Big was cremated. Which, what was the point of the coffin in the funeral home, or like whatever the place, the setting for where they had his memorial? They couldn't have, like, why was there a coffin there if he was cremated? Is that normal? I've only been to funerals where there are coffins, not coffins and then an urn. I just think it's weird. All right, so now that that's happened, Carrie feels away, again, understandably, because they did not give her a heads up that, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to deliver your husband's ashes to you. And they just kind of do it so casually, like Avon calling, just, you know, like Amazon leaving a box at your door. All that to say, Carrie calls over Miranda and Stanford, and so they're all having a moment. It just so happens that while they are conversing, Charlotte shows up. Carrie did not invite Charlotte because Charlotte showed her ass at the funeral home. So she's like, you know, she's too emotional, like she's doing the absolute most. She feels bad, I get it, but I'm the one grieving, so I didn't invite her over here, and now she just showed up. And so Carrie tells Stanford to hide because she doesn't want Charlotte to see Stanford, because they're already kind of having this little head-butting experience of who belongs in the group, so to speak. I guess Stanford feels a way about being excluded from stuff. So again, Carrie shows up. Stanford's supposed to be hiding, but he forgets his martini in the living room, and he runs to go get his martini. Charlotte sees him. She feels a way about not being included, and Carrie basically just has to tell her about herself, like, well, you've been doing the most, and I'm trying to mourn, and basically you're not helping anything at all. Talking a lot. And so Charlotte feels away because they had to tell her about herself. And so now she's crying, and it's like, this is why we didn't invite you, because you're doing this and ain't nobody got time. She's like, don't make it about you. And Charlotte's like, I'm not trying to make it about me, but it's obvious that you're mad at me because I made you go to my daughter's recital, and there's no other reason why you would call Stanford over other than me. So it's just like a whole thing. And Carrie's like, I didn't call you because you basically, as I said before, you're doing the most, you get too emotional. So that's that. Miranda has spent the night again. Carrie is having trouble sleeping. Is that the end of it? Basically. Like, Miranda's asleep, Carrie's tossing and turning, and she's like, what time is it? And Carrie goes to sleep on the couch because, again, she's tossing and turning when her friend is actually asleep. So in order to give her some peace, she goes and sits on the bed. Nope, on the bed. She goes and sleeps on the couch. And next to the couch is the unopened box of Big's ashes. And that's basically the end of the episode, is Carrie asleep on the couch looking at the box that contains her husband's ashes. So episode 2 is basically all about saying goodbye to Big. So I'll be back with episode 3. Again, let me know if you like this kind of in the moment reaction to these. Just kind of sit down, I'm looking at the TV as it's happening. Let me know if you like it like that, and then I can make more if that's what you like. Okay, until my next video, I'll see y'all later. Bye.